At the age of 5, I was quite an inquisitive child. Our family lived in a private house in a small town. We had a wonderful garden, full of life. I enjoyed observing its summer diversity. I particularly liked the butterflies. They were the largest among the insects and, accordingly, the most spectacular. The butterflies beautifully flitted from place to place, engaged in their insect affairs. But I noticed that there were some double butterflies. They seemed connected, sitting on top of each other, and even in flight they did not separate. Naturally, I went to the adults for explanations. They explained to me that the butterflies that flew like this were Siamese twins. They were born that way. I already knew about twins and Siamese twins and accepted this statement unquestioningly. Of course, because adults were an authority for me. So I remembered it as an axiom. Many years have passed. Sometimes, walking past blooming weeds, I wondered, why are there so many Siamese butterflies among them? What processes caused them to be born like this? Once, while on vacation with friends, I decided to discuss with them my childhood memories of frequent cases of Siamese butterflies. They happily and not without surprise explained to me the process of butterfly reproduction and even wondered if my children were, by chance, adopted. I vividly remember my astonishment at the realization of my own naivety, and even some resentment towards the people who once chose a lie to avoid a slippery topic. And then, after a pile of years, it made me feel embarrassed. Later, I met similar experiences in other people and realized that such situations are not uncommon. This prompted me to figure out what drives our behavior and makes us so block critical thinking. And it turned out that I was only seeing the tip of the iceberg. There are many so-called cognitive biases or behavioral patterns that often lead us to mistakes. They make us take the wrong steps in life or completely ignore obvious things. In society, these patterns are often perceived as character traits, but in reality, they are not. Cognitive biases are our weaknesses, which make us vulnerable, so it's important to study and understand their nature. The brain is an incredibly complex organ, which, however, is not distinguished by great speed. Because of this, it often simplifies information processing, saving time and energy. In some cases, the brain may react in a standard way in similar situations. That is, the brain does not spend time analyzing the situation, it already has a ready template for reacting to it. This simplification helps us make decisions faster in complex or ambiguous circumstances, but it can also lead to incorrect judgments or irrational conclusions. Such simplifications are known as cognitive biases. Below is a brief list of our inherent weaknesses, which are well described and studied. Now, let's move on to the description of the main cognitive biases, which I am sure you will recognize. Availability heuristic. This bias is based on the tendency of people to assess the probability of events based on how easily they can recall examples of similar events in their memory. For example, after reading news about plane crashes, people may overestimate the risk of air travel, even though statistically it remains one of the safest ways to travel. In other words, if you want to fly calmly, don't watch the movie Airplane by Abrahams and Zucker before the flight. You'll sleep badly from laughter and you'll be in a bad mood on the flight. I'm joking, of course, but it's not a good idea to tell your friend about all the tests you've failed in life before an important test. You'll knock his motivation off. Anchoring. Anchoring occurs when people use initial information as an anchor or basis for making decisions, even if this information is outdated or irrelevant. For example, if you're first told that a product costs $100 and then you are informed that it can be purchased for $50, you may consider it a profitable deal without additional analysis of the market price. Familiar situation, right? This bias is also widely used by the authorities of some countries. For example, initially, they talk about a $1,000 fine for a minor offence, causing social dissatisfaction. But a week later, the government reduces the fine to $100, and everyone is happy, although the fine was not necessary at all. Also, anchoring can be seen in the constant waving of nuclear weapons or reminders that our race is the best race on Earth. No need to explain here. The very essence of advertising is also partly built on an anchor, the constant updating in the head of the product image. But you need to hold on and not succumb to the anchor. For example, recently I have been haunted by bra ads, just massively and on all websites. Buy, buy. But I hold on and I don't buy. Although, I don't know. Maybe because I'm a man. Prospect theory. Prospect theory has several important postulates. Decisions are based on changes in state, not on the final result. For example, winning $50 may seem more significant if you currently have little money than if you already have a lot. The value function is disproportionate, concave for gains and convex for losses. This means that the first dollars of gain or loss have a greater emotional impact than the subsequent ones. The difference between no gain and a gain of $100 feels more significant than between gains of $1,000 and $1,100. Loss aversion. People are more sensitive to losses than to equivalent gains. The pain of losing $50 is felt stronger than the joy of winning the same money. Probability function. People do not perceive probabilities linearly. Small probabilities are overestimated and large ones are underestimated. This means that we can give too much importance to extremely rare events, such as winning the lottery, and underestimate the likelihood of more probable events. Prospect theory helps understand why in real life people often make decisions that would seem irrational from the point of view of classical economic theory, which assumes that we always act to maximize our benefit. Marketers are well aware of all these weaknesses and they use them. Just walk through a shopping mall and admire the advertising. I think you will be able to find the use of all these postulates. As a child, I was taught a trick that uses prospect theory. For example, if you got one candy and there are two of you, you offer your friend to choose one of the clenched fists. There is a candy in one and there is none in the other. And to make your friend choose the empty fist, you need to place your hands so that the empty one is closer to the person making the choice. Usually, he chooses the closer hand. With my cat Martin, we also play this game. Although my successes are doubtful, Martin always guesses in which hand the treat is, regardless of how I arrange them. When it's my turn to choose, the situation always changes to the opposite. For example, when I hear a cat smell and run to the hallway, it usually means that Martin decided to have fun and spotted my sneaker. I know the theory of perspectives, so I choose the far one. And, usually, I lose. That scoundrel marks both the far and the near. Chronic non-liking. An extremely advanced form of lack of reaction to an interesting video. To get rid of it, you need to immediately like or dislike the video, and then a pleasant state of approaching happiness will occur, both in you and in the video author. Such a pair liking. The best results are achieved in subscribers to the channel. Ownership effect. The ownership effect makes people value things they already own more than identical things they do not own. For example, you may value your own car higher than the same car being sold on the market. This effect is often used by company owners, motivating their staff to think of the company as ours and that the prosperity of the company is our sacred duty. Although usually, the only thing that actually belongs to the employee may be just hemorrhoids earned over the years of fidgeting on a hard office chair. And here's another tip. If you hear phrases from your husband or wife like, "you're mine," or "you're mine," don't relax. Maybe they are using these words as magic spells to convince themselves to stay with you. Status quo effect. The status quo effect manifests when people prefer things to stay as they are, instead of accepting changes or considering alternatives. This bias can significantly affect decision-making, even when changes could bring benefits. One of the striking examples is the millions of people who continue to live or work in inconvenient, unhealthy, or dangerous conditions simply because they are used to it. Large populations may remain in regions with poor economic conditions or low quality of life, despite better opportunities elsewhere. Often, this is not only related to financial limitations, but also to deep-rooted resistance to changing the usual way of life. Seeing only the tip of the iceberg. People often tend to underestimate the volume of the unknown, focusing only on what is known or easily observed. This tendency can lead to an overestimation of one's knowledge or understanding of the situation. It's like seeing only the tip of the iceberg, not realizing its huge, hidden underwater part. Lenin once said that even a cook can manage the state. He didn't know how talented taxi drivers could be as politicians. I'm joking, of course, but in reality, many other professions can show unexpected talents in absolutely unexpected areas, especially those to which they have no relation. The false consensus effect lies in the tendency to believe that one's beliefs, behavior, and preferences are generally accepted and shared by most. This tendency can lead to an overestimation of the prevalence of one's thoughts and behavior among other people. This bias is also widespread. Sometimes it is interpreted as narcissism, often inherent in dictators. But let's talk about normal people. Here's my cat, for example. Oh no, he heard me. I didn't say anything. Contrast bias. Contrast bias arises when our perception of two similar options depends on the order in which they are presented to us. If you are first shown a less attractive option, the second, better one, will seem even more attractive to us. Imagine that you came to buy a new smartphone. The seller first shows you an old, weak model. After that, he shows you the latest novelty, a faster smartphone with better features. Although the difference between the models may not be particularly large due to the comparison with the outdated model, the new smartphone looks much better. As a result, you feel a stronger desire to buy the more expensive model. This tendency affects not only purchases, but also many other decisions in our lives. Being aware of this bias can help us make more objective choices. Framing effect. The framing effect is a psychological bias that affects our perception of information depending on how it is presented. This bias encourages us to perceive the same situations differently based on the formulation used in their description. Example in medical practice. A doctor who tells a patient that 90% of surgeries end successfully usually meets agreement on the procedure. However, if the patient is told that the operation has a 10% risk of failure, the likelihood of refusal increases, although the mathematical chances of success have not changed. Financial context. An investor who is offered a project with a 70% chance of earning is more likely to invest than when they are told about a 30% chance of losing investments. Knowledge of the framing effect can protect you from ill-considered decisions, especially when it comes to finances, health, or legal issues. By critically assessing how information is presented to you, you can avoid manipulations and make a more objective choice. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias, my favorite, is the tendency of people to pay attention to information that confirms their previous beliefs or hypotheses and to ignore information that refutes them. For example, if you believe that consuming a certain product is harmful, you may focus on studies that confirm this harm, ignoring studies that demonstrate its safety. This bias is one of the main causes of disputes on forums and social networks, as it encourages people to seek confirmation of their beliefs, ignoring counter-arguments. Confirmation bias can also affect the perception and evaluation of comments and opinions expressed in videos, leading to intensified discussions and often limiting the possibility of reaching an agreement between different parties. To illustrate, let's join hands and go to a dance with cries of ho, mi, o, pa, thi, a, and tai, vak, tsai, na, tion. And this will not only vividly characterize us, but also show that we are capable of shortening our lives for our beliefs. An extremely harmful bias, it blocks critical thinking and makes us look inadequate. The effect of multiple influence, or the effect of illusory truth. The effect of multiple influence describes a psychological bias in which people tend to evaluate information as more true if they have heard it repeatedly. This effect demonstrates that even information that initially seemed doubtful can seem more convincing after its repeated presentation. This effect occurs because repeated encounters with a certain statement increase its familiarity. Our brain intuitively perceives familiarity as an indicator of truth, which can lead to people, often without realizing it, starting to consider familiar statements more credible and convincing. The effect of multiple influence is significant in various areas, from marketing to politics, where the repetition of information is often used as a strategy to strengthen beliefs and influence public opinion. Halo effect. This bias occurs when the perception of one positive characteristic of a person influences the overall impression of them. For example, if a person looks attractive, we may overly positively assess their intelligence or skills. Remember the school crush on the most beautiful girl or boy. It's only later, having a mortgage and 2 children, that a person realizes that they rushed a bit to choose their best person in the world. But in life, we can use this bias ourselves, looking perfect at various meetings, especially recruitment ones. Do you think I just went to choose a cat in a tuxedo for nothing? Although it didn't particularly help me. But actually, it's not a joke here. The last 3 biases can be subtly but surely used against us. Let me give a hypothetical or not very example. Imagine the town of Dogtown, where the mayoral elections are approaching. There are 2 candidates, Candidate A and Candidate B. Candidate B is the ideal choice, widely supported by the community, while Candidate A, a rogue, decided to resort to manipulations. Candidate A knows that most residents actively use the social network Pigbook. He creates an account that posts touching cat photos, patriotic slogans, congratulates on local holidays and important events in the city. This positive content creates the impression of a reliable source of information regarding the place of residence, thereby eliciting trust from the residents. After some time, when trust is already established, the account begins to publish articles that portray Candidate B in a negative light. Since residents have already associated the account with positive emotions, they unconsciously begin to accept negative information about B, activating the halo effect. The social network, noticing users' likes for certain posts, begins to show them more similar content, reinforcing their biases and turning some into active campaigners against B. This leads to the effect of multiple influence and confirmation bias. Over time, these brainwashed residents begin to perceive even former friends who continue to support B as enemies. This manipulative approach demonstrates how easily manipulations can influence public opinion, undermining social cohesion and trust in society. Does this situation seem unfamiliar to you? You're lucky, or you haven't been paying attention. But let's not talk about sad things. Cognitive biases are often considered character traits. but these are far from one and the same. Cognitive biases are psychological mechanisms that distort the way information is perceived and processed. They are often unconscious and occur automatically during perception and thinking. Cognitive biases are universal and human. They do not depend on personality traits and can affect all people, regardless of their personal qualities. Cognitive biases can be temporary and change depending on the specific situation or context. They can also be corrected or minimized through education, training, and self-analysis. Character is more stable and changes more difficultly. Changes in character usually occur slowly and may require significant effort and personal development. Cognitive biases primarily affect thought processes and perception, leading to errors in judgments or decisions. Character affects a wide range of behavior in various aspects of life, including work, personal relationships, and ethical decisions. Both aspects, cognitive biases and character, are important for understanding human behavior, but they function at different levels of psychological organization and have different significance in analyzing human behavior. So my butterfly story was a vivid example of the halo effect, based on my boundless trust in older relatives. But now I have freed myself from illusions. Think about the information you've heard, and I'll just sit here in the park, watching the insect coitus. But the little ones are zealous. Nothing distracts them from the process. Not even the dog that carried its friend on its back because its paws were tired could bother them.